Have you ever wondered why, at certain moments in life, it feels like all the answers are out of reach and God's silence seems almost deafening? We often find ourselves searching for direction, yearning for confirmation, or even waiting for a clear sign to assure us that we are on the right path. When the answer doesn't come as we hoped, anxiety begins to grow, and doubt settles in like an uncomfortable shadow, clouding our thoughts and decisions. But what if the silence isn't emptiness but part of the answer itself? God works in mysterious ways, and what seems confusing or even frustrating today could, in fact, be the foundation of a greater purpose slowly unfolding. Hearing God's voice can be a challenge when we're so focused on our own expectations that we fail to notice the divine whispers around us. God isn't limited to grand manifestations. He speaks in subtle ways. Sometimes it's in the words of a friend that arrive at just the right moment, in a door that unexpectedly closes, or in a verse that deeply touches the heart, bringing a message we didn't anticipate. Silence doesn't mean the absence of God. It's just that often we are too busy to notice His presence. Reflect on this. Why do certain thoughts or people remain constantly on your mind? Could it be that through them, God is trying to show you something important, guiding you toward a path you haven't yet seen? Through these situations, perhaps it is time to look within and reflect deeply. Could it be that God is teaching you a lesson in forgiveness, urging you to close certain chapters, or even calling you to trust in Him more and in your own strength less? As the psalmist reminded us, commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him and He will act. Psalm 37 verse 5. It might be that at this very moment God is asking you for something simple yet powerful, to trust fully. And when that trust springs from the heart, you will realize that the answer has always been there, waiting for you to be ready to receive it. Just as heavy clouds signal the rain that brings life to the earth, what seems like an obstacle now may be the harbinger of a greater blessing yet to come. It seemed as though the heavy clouds in the sky reflected his state of mind, while the bus jolted along the winding dirt road leading to the village. He wasn't sure why he had chosen that place. Maybe it was due to a casual recommendation from a friend, or perhaps something deeper, like a silent, persistent voice guiding him to an unknown destination. All he knew was that he needed to go. The past months had been like a labyrinth with no way out, an endless series of questions without answers. On the outside, he was the same as always, polite, organized, with a respectable career and friends who described him as someone balanced. But on the inside, it was a different story. He was a restless soul, consumed by doubts and the feeling that something essential was missing, as if the solid ground beneath his feet was slowly disappearing. Storm. Her name echoed in his mind like an endless refrain, a melody that refused to quiet. No matter how hard he tried, he simply couldn't forget her. They had met in an almost insignificant way, a casual encounter in improbable circumstances. She was a stranger in a place he knew like the back of his hand, and he, moved by an impulse, had offered to help her. But the moment their eyes met, something within him faltered. It was as if, in the depth of that gaze, there was a story waiting to be uncovered. And so it began. Conversations that seemed endless, filled with hidden meanings and unasked questions. Unexpected encounters that, no matter how random they appeared, carried the weight of something destined. There was something inevitable in the way their lives had crossed, as though every moment was a piece of a bigger puzzle, assembled by forces beyond his understanding. Until he realized he was completely caught up, as if every moment spent beside her had left deep marks on his soul. But the end came abruptly with no explanation. She pulled away suddenly, and where once there had been laughter and words full of meaning, there was now only an unsettling silence. He tried to move on, but it was like walking in circles. Every night he prayed, asking God for clarity, seeking to understand the purpose of that emptiness. Why did she still occupy his thoughts? Why did it seem impossible to forget her, even with the passing of time? The village, small and isolated, was like a refuge from the noise of the world, with its cobbled streets worn down by time and old houses, some covered in green moss that seemed to tell stories of past generations. He found shelter in a modest inn, where the constant aroma of fresh bread straight from the oven created a comforting atmosphere. Still, even amid the tranquility of the place, the silence around him seemed to amplify the storm he carried inside. It was as if he had come there not only to escape, but to find answers that insisted on hiding. The aroma of fresh bread seemed to fill the air, a constant comfort amidst the scene of quiet streets and the distant sound of the wind. The place emanated an almost palpable peace, deeply contrasting with the turmoil reigning in his heart. On the third day, as he explored the surroundings, his steps led him to an ancient church atop a hill. The building, simple yet majestically serene, seemed to have defied time and storms to remain there, like a guardian of the stories of faith and redemption from generations past. Moved by something he couldn't explain, he entered the small sanctuary. Perhaps he was searching for a moment of peace, something that could calm the whirlwind inside him. But what he found was far more unexpected. She was there. Sitting in the first pew, her hands crossed and her head bowed, she seemed as lost as he felt. The soft light filtering through the stained glass windows cast delicate shadows around her, as if even the space itself conspired to make that reunion deeply meaningful. He froze, unable to take another step, as 1,000 thoughts collided in his mind. Would she notice him? And if she did, what would she say? The silence of the church was heavy, but not uncomfortable, as if the moment existed outside of time, reserved only for the two of them. For a moment he thought he was imagining it. Perhaps it was the exhaustion or the weight of his own thoughts, but no, it was real. She was really there. When she heard his footsteps, she froze, her eyes wide in surprise. "You here?" Her voice was little more than a whisper, laden with disbelief and something else he couldn't quite identify. He stood still for a moment, the words caught in his throat, before slowly approaching, as though afraid that a sudden move might shatter that fragile reality. "I didn't know you'd be here." She looked away, but he noticed what her reddened eyes couldn't hide. She had been crying. "I needed a place to think," she explained, her voice almost sounding like a defense. He nodded, respecting the weight of the moment, and sat beside her, both surrounded by the subtle echo of the empty church. The silence between them was dense but not hostile. It was as if each breath carried everything they couldn't say. Only the distant sound of the wind blowing through the stained glass and the creaking of the old wooden floorboards interrupted the moment, as each of them struggled to find the words that truly mattered. The sound of the wind passing through the windows filled the silence between them, like a subtle murmur from the church itself. Finally, she began to speak. Her words came hesitantly, but they were filled with sincerity. She told him about the reasons for her departure, the doubts that had become unbearable, the fears she had always hidden, even from herself. Each sentence seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders, but it also revealed the depth of what she had been carrying. Then came the confession he never expected to hear. "I can't stop thinking about you either." His heart raced. It was as if those words had illuminated something inside him that he hadn't even known was in the dark. But before he could respond, she continued, "I don't know what this means, but I've been praying, asking God what I should do. And somehow I ended up here." The vulnerability in her voice was almost tangible, as though every word was an attempt to understand something that still seemed bigger than both of them. For a moment, silence returned, deeper than before. But it wasn't the same silence as before, full of questions and uncertainties. It was a silence of understanding, of something that was finally beginning to make sense. In that instant, he realized that this was the answer they had both been seeking, not in words, but in being there together, in that place. The journey of doubts and prayers had led them to the same destination, and perhaps to the same redemption. He wasn't seeking in that moment a guarantee that they would be together, but something deeper, the clarity that many times God communicates in ways we can't anticipate. He remembered the verse his mother always recited with such faith and conviction, "Call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." Jeremiah 33 verse 3. It was as if, in that moment, he finally understood the meaning of that promise. God's plan didn't just involve what would happen between them, but more importantly, what they needed to learn from each other. Each one's journey, with its doubts, fears, and discoveries, was intertwined in a way that was only now becoming clear. They left the church together, walking slowly and steadily, not knowing what the future held, but with an indescribable feeling that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The future was uncertain, but somehow that moment was enough. They didn't need definitive answers, just the trust that they were being guided. The moral of the story? Life is often not about the final destination, but about the learning and growth along the way. And in some situations, God's true answer is simply the silent presence that leads us to a deeper understanding, greater than we ever imagined. Life often presents us with situations that seem inexplicable, confusing, and sometimes even painful. There are moments when you feel the weight of unanswered questions, as if the silence of God is an insurmountable barrier, something impossible to cross. It is in these moments that the heart cries out and you wonder, why do I keep feeling this way? Why does this person, this moment, or this situation continue to linger in my mind? Sometimes, it may feel like God is distant, that He has stepped away and left you alone in this whirlwind of uncertainties. But in reality, He has never been closer. What you need to understand deep down is that God doesn't only work on the surface. He works in the depths, in the very core of your soul, where often you cannot see but you can feel. He is shaping, preparing, and teaching, even when you don't understand why things are happening the way they are. Perhaps what he is doing isn't responding immediately to your questions, but rather transforming you through the process. God doesn't limit himself to giving easy answers, but instead, he guides you toward a deeper understanding and a stronger faith. He is working even in the silence, in the deepest corners of your being. At the core of your being, where the oldest wounds lie, where the deepest doubts linger, and where dreams you may not even have the courage to admit reside, it is there that God works. The answer you're waiting for may not be the one he is preparing, but in all cases, it will always be exactly what you truly need. Maybe what he is doing right now is teaching you to trust, even when you don't understand the reasons or the path. God is not a father who simply gives us everything we ask for instantly, as if everything were an immediate favor. He is a loving father who shapes, prepares, and transforms us before giving us what we desire. The process of shaping and preparing is not always easy or comfortable. Sometimes, his silence is not absence, but a carefully reserved space for us to grow, mature, and strengthen our faith. It's like gold going through the fire, being purified and refined until it reaches its purest and most valuable form. In the same way, our lives, our souls, and our hearts are passed through the fire of difficulties and challenges, not to destroy us, but to refine us and make us more prepared for what God has in store for us. Being refined is a painful process, but it's a necessary one. Every prayer, every tear, and every moment of waiting is part of this journey of purification. When something or someone stays in your thoughts so intensely that it consumes your peace, it's time to question, what is God trying to teach me through this? He uses people, situations, and even our own emotions as tools to reveal something greater. Maybe he is teaching you to let go, to forgive, to trust him more fully, or simply to understand that some connections have a purpose that goes beyond our immediate comprehension. The Apostle Paul wrote in his letter to the Romans, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Romans 8 verse 28. This means that even when we can't see the purpose of a situation, even when it seems confusing or painful, God is working. He uses each moment, each challenge to shape us, to prepare us for something greater. What seems like an obstacle now might be preparation for something grand in the future. The secret is to trust the process, even when we can't fully understand it. We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Romans 8 verse 28. Everything, absolutely everything, is working in your favor, even when it feels like the whole world is against you. What seems like a loss or a disappointment today may actually be a divine redirection to something better, something you couldn't see before. What feels like an endless wait, filled with uncertainty, may be preparing you for something that will exceed all your expectations, something far greater than you could ever imagine. But there is something fundamental you need to do. Trust. Trust isn't just saying you believe. Trust is resting in God, even when you can't see the next step, even when the answers haven't arrived. Trust is surrendering, knowing that he knows what's best for you, even if you don't understand the path right now. It's believing that when God says, wait, he's preparing something that, in due time, will be revealed in all its fullness. Trust is the key that unlocks the power of God in our lives, for it allows us to live with peace, even in the midst of storms, and gives us strength to keep walking, knowing that he is with us always. When you see nothing happening, it's important to be certain that even in silence, God is working in your favor. He is not absent. He is operating behind the scenes, moving the pieces of his perfect will, even when you cannot perceive it. Remember that the same God who created the universe with words, who formed the heavens and the earth, is the same one who cares for the smallest details of your life. Every thought, every desire of your heart does not go unnoticed. He sees and cares for everything. Perhaps at this moment you're trying to solve everything on your own, carrying a burden that was never meant for you to bear. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11 verse 28. He doesn't want you to live bound by pain or doubt, nor to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. He calls you to hand it all over to him. Trust in his plans, rest in the certainty that he is able to do immeasurably more than you can ask or imagine. He wants to relieve you, to give you peace, and to restore the joy that may have been lost in the battles of life. When you surrender to him, you find the relief and strength to move forward. God has perfect plans for you, and everything he does is immersed in his grace. The answer you seek may not come in the form you expect. It might be a no when you were hoping for a yes, or a change of plans that feels like a mistake but actually leads you to the right place, to the purpose he has for your life. Sometimes, that answer comes as a healing for something you didn't even realize needed to be healed, a profound transformation only He can make. The important thing to remember is that God does not make mistakes. His plans are perfect, even when we cannot understand the reason for each situation we face. No matter what you're facing right now, don't give up. Keep praying, keep trusting, keep seeking. Stay firm in your faith, knowing that even in silence He is working. Remember the words of the prophet Isaiah, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Isaiah 40 verse 31. This is the promise for those who, even in difficulties, surrender to God's will. He will renew your strength, and you will find the courage and peace you need to move forward, trusting in the plan He has for your life. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Isaiah 40 verse 31. Waiting is not the end. It is the beginning of something grand that God is preparing for you. Every moment of waiting has a purpose, and it is during this time that He works in your heart, shaping and preparing you for what is to come. Allow yourself to learn through the process, to grow even when the pain seems overwhelming. Every challenge carries a hidden lesson, and every difficulty is an opportunity to draw closer to God. Above all, allow yourself to hear the voice of God. He often speaks in the softest whisper, in the deepest silence, or through the most unexpected circumstances. When you quiet yourself and listen, you will find the peace that surpasses all understanding. Trust, for He is taking care of every detail of your life even when you cannot see it. In the right time, you will see that everything He has done, every step of the process, was to lead you to a place of fulfillment and purpose. And then, when you look back, you will understand that, despite the difficulties, He was present in every step, guiding, renewing, and preparing you for what lies ahead. The answer has always been there, waiting for the right moment to be received, waiting for you to be ready to trust. I want to deeply thank you for following this journey to the end. It was made with great care and love, with the desire to touch your heart in some way. If this story made a difference for you, share in the comments what impacted your life the most. Don't forget to leave your like, subscribe, and send this video to friends and family who might be touched by it as well. See you soon, and may God bless each of you with peace and wisdom.